Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom is back and welcome back to another episode of Top Drives and another episode of what can you get from that pack. Now I did mention this yesterday, but I did want to do a what you could get from that pack kind of video for this very special pack that is needed for the around the world in 80 hours challenge. It's not a very fun challenge. In fact, it's actually very mundane and it's very tedious, but the pack is actually pretty interesting, so much so that I actually opened one yesterday, and we're gonna start off with the car that I literally got yesterday, and that was a TVR Tuscan, which I found I was pretty happy to get that as a pull, mainly because it was an RQ64. And the thing about this pack is that there's a lot of low-end ultra rares, like a lot of cars that are 50, but I'm pretty sure that there are only 3 ultra rares that are actually RQ60 and above. It's the Tuscan, the Hyena, and I think there's like one other car. Yeah, the Panamericana. So these are the only 3 cars that are RQ60 and above. Everything else that you see here is a lower range ultra rare, which I think is kind of interesting. But yes, the TVR Tuscan is what is starting us off today. Now, the TVR Tuscan is very middle of the pack. I would say frequent provider. Not good, but it definitely is not bad either, but it's very disappointing, I would say, because it has a very low 0 to 60, a decent top speed, decent handling, but at the end of the day, you guys know it's a jack of all trades, master of none. Only 79 MRA. I'm going to show you the times right here, okay, for the TVR Tuscan. So, as you can see, the TVR Tuscan just doesn't really survive anywhere. Like, even in the twisties or in the drags, there's going to be a better option. For a twisty option, you'd rather just use the Alpha, and for the drags, obviously you'd rather just use the XKR75. And as you can see over here, I'm comparing it to a bunch of RQ64, what I consider to be hybrid cars. The XKR75 is a little bit more fast orientated. It ain't no spiker level, but it is more fast orientated, but it still has, well, better handling than the Tuscan, really. So I'm really putting up against, you know, basically like, you know, hybrid cars like the Charger as well, 3492. This just pales in comparison. I think that the TVR Tuscan shouldn't be a 64. I think it's more of a 63, because as you can see over here, it just doesn't really work anywhere. The only time where it actually gives a little bit of value is the quarter mile. And that is a drag spec version, obviously, and as you can see, there's a very close difference. So if I were to go and drag spec the XKR75, which is something that I would do anyway, then it would beat the Tuscan wherever it's relevant in the drag. So yeah, the Tuscan, not very good, I would say. Not very bad. Obviously, you can't really go wrong with those stats, but it's hard to go right with that as well. So it's going to be frequent provider. Now, the next car that I do want to showcase is the opposite of the Tuscan, is the Hyena. And the Hyena, I'm actually going to put it in Der Kaiser. In the past, I've put it in Daily Driver, but this time I'm actually going to put it in Der Kaiser. I think that the Hyena is great. I think it's great value. So I'm going to show you the times over here, right? And as you can see, the Hyena beats the car. I would say the biggest competitor for the Hyena is the Delta Integrale. They're both Italian. They're both from the same year-ish, like 93, and this is 92, so very, very similar. They're both Italian, and they're both in the same range, and they're both 4-wheel drive and all that kind of stuff. And it beats it by every metric. If I were to take away the Skyline GTR, the Hyena would be bright green everywhere. The main reason why I want to showcase the Skyline GTR as well is the Skyline GTR is 1 RQ higher than the Hyena, but these two cars are still pretty much 50-50. Like, the Hyena is still better on hairpin, indoor karting, fast circuit, rolling, canyon, and all the drags. And yeah, I mean, if you take away the Nissan Skyline, then the Hyena is also the best car for all the twisty circuits as well. So I'll get rid of that, I'll get rid of that. And as you can see, it's basically green across the board. It only loses to the Integrale on the car park, and that's it. And obviously, like, it's gonna beat all the other cars that are lower in RQ, like the Nuvola. Even though the Nuvola handles better, same story for the Integrale, which handles better. Very interesting though. If I were to take away these two cars, this is like completely irrelevant, but like, you put these two cars together, you think that they're very similar. 4992, this is also 4992, but the Delta Integrale is just a better car. Which is very interesting because the Nuvola actually has better MRA. I think it's really down to the fact that the Delta is just a lighter car, I believe. Yeah, 1450 compared to the Delta's 1300, but that isn't the comparison that we're really talking about. What I want to talk about is that the Hyena is actually very impressive. So I'm actually going to put it Der Kaiser. Now, next up is Porsche Panamericana. Now, this one is just not very interesting. I'll put it in Pernicious Ulcer. The main thing about the Panamericana, what really falls off the mark is you look at this right away, right? 5258, 81, 79. The only thing that the Panamericana has on its sleeve, its only, like, I guess, X factor, is that the Porsche is medium ground clearance. That's it. And honestly, I think the sole reason that it is medium ground clearance is the only reason why I'm not putting in a hot garbage. It's not very good. Next up is the TVR Chimera. And the TVR Chimera, once again, I think a lot of TVRs are basically just very frequent provider-ish. Like, they're very regular cars. Like, they're not bad. Like, they don't have any like very bad like stat, but they don't have a good stat either. They're all just like, you know, jack of all trades kind of cars. And that's why I like the Tamora so much. I think the Tamora is the only ultra rare TVR that actually knows what it wants to be. It's just a dragster. It knows what it wants to be. Like this Chimera over here, right? Like, you know, the handling isn't too bad for a 56. 0 to 60 isn't that low, but it's not that slow either. But 67 MRA, I mean, that's not going to get you anywhere. You know what I mean? So, yeah, very average. Next up is the TVR 420. It's the Reese car. Obviously, Reese is going to like this. On paper stats on this car, very, very disappointing. 5 seconds, 0 to 60, 78 handling. And it's not even medium ground clear. That's the thing. And on top of that, 78 MRA isn't too bad, but definitely like there are cars that are better than it. I'm not gonna give it hot garbage. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but it's definitely like a car that I wouldn't upgrade anytime soon. I'm an ultra collector and I like to try and upgrade everything, but the TVR 420, I've had this in my garage for I think about 2 to 3 weeks now. I've not touched it once. Next up is the Alpha. Now, this one actually is pretty good. 4-wheel drive and 92 handling. I'm going to give it daily driver, actually. 0 to 60 is weak. Don't get me wrong. 0 to 60 is weak. It's not even 6 seconds, so it's a car that you would 323. But, you know, the main thing about the Stradale is that it really combines good handling with 4-wheel drive. I'll give it daily driver. On top of that, it is a saloon, guys. It is a saloon, so that is one thing to consider as well. It has that extra niche. Next up is the Alpha GTV Cup. Now, the Alpha GTV Cup is not a bad car. It handles very, very well, and it's very cheap to use. I feel like a lot of people might think that it's a Der Kaiser, but I don't think so. I think it's daily driver at best. The main thing about the GTV Cup is this. The benchmark. The benchmark for low RQ twisty cars to me is always going to be the Dodge Circuit EV. And if you're going to be 1 RQ higher than the Dodge Circuit EV, you better talk the talk. And unfortunately, this car just doesn't. The Alpha, you know, it still loses the majority of the track sets. The Dodge Circuit EV is built different. This car is the best RQ50 in the game, in my opinion. This thing is unbeatable. This is the benchmark. So a lot of cars that are in the lower RQs that are meant to be twistier cars, like, you know, a lot of these are the new Alphas from Amalfi Pros. I always compare them to the EV, and none of them can beat the EV. So because of that, I'm not going to give it to Kaiser. It's still good. It's still good, but it ain't Der Kaiser level in my opinion. Next up is the Nuvola, and the Nuvola, as you saw, was not very good compared to the Delta Integrale, but it knows that it's not as good as the Delta Integrale because it's lower in RQ, and it's lower in RQ by about 4 RQ. So because of that, you know, I'm not going to say it's hot garbage or anything like that. I think it's a very frequent provider-ish kind of car. There isn't too much to say about it. Like, the handling is decent. The 4-wheel drive part is also very, very nice. But the thing is, right, like, the 0 to 60 is very, very weak. It's so similar to the GTA, and the GTA is 3 RQ cheaper with the same drivetrain and the same handling score as well. So I know that the Alfa Romeo Nuvola has better MRA, 71, but that's not saying much. It's an average car. Next up is the Audi A4. Now, the Audi A4, I'm going to give it daily driver mainly because it is a 4-wheel drive center tire car that handles pretty well. No MRA at all whatsoever. 44 MRA, nothing. But as far as German 4-wheel drive center tire cars go, and, you know, for the cheaper range, the Quattro is not that bad. Daily driver, you are. What is bad though is the S2 Avant, and I'm gonna put that in hot garbage. The only thing that this car kind of has to its name is that low 0 to 60, right? Like, it's got 5.7 for a 0 to 60 for a 4-wheel drive car that's medium. That's pretty decent for a 53 RQ car. That being said though, it's just garbage across the board. The handling is garbage. 52 MRA is just garbage. I mean, Audis suck, and that's no surprise. The S3 as well is going to be pernicious ulcer. I mean, it's 4-wheel drive medium. At least it handles a little better, I guess, but it's still flat out garbage. And then we also have the S4 Avant, which is like a pernicious ulcer. I'm being nice putting these two cars in pernicious ulcer. Every part of my being wants to put them in hot garbage. They suck. But it is four-wheel drive. It is medium ground clearance. Like, it isn't completely useless. Same thing for the S6. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world. Well, the handling is really bad. 55 MRA as well. You know what? Actually, he's got a very low 0 to 60, but I don't care. I'm gonna put that hot garbage. Next up is going to be one of the worst four-wheel drive sanitary cars in the game, the Audi V8 Quattro. 6969. I mean, that's very nice in terms of the number itself, but as an ultra rare, especially a four-wheel drive standard tire ultra rare, 69 MRA, I mean, it's useless. I know I like to say that four-wheel drive standard is a saving grace and I shouldn't hot garbage it, but 69, that is like a drag race car. Not a drag race, but that's like a drag car's handling score. 60. That is bad. That is really, really bad. And it's the same thing for the V8 Quattro. I mean, these three are just all garbage. Next up is the Mangusta. Mangusta is alright. I think it's a very decent, like, middle of the pack kind of car. And then with the Lotus Esprits. Lotus Esprits as well, very middle of the pack. You know, they handle pretty decently. I would say that they're kind of like the TVRs, but they just have, you know, slower 0 to 60s, but slightly better handling. But they're kind of like the same energy, you know. Porsche 911 Carrera ain't too bad. 73 MRA, 90 not MRA, but 90 handling even when you max it out. 0 to 60 could be a little bit better, but once again, for 53 RQ, I'm not expecting too much. It's okay. As a hybrid, not going to win you much, not going to lose you much as well. You know what? I'm actually going to bring it down to Pernicious Ulcer. I use it pretty often, to be fair, but I kind of use it pretty often as like a C-team kind of car. So I'm going to put it as Pernicious Ulcer, but like a high Pernicious Ulcer. Now, I thought I'm talking too fast. Next up are going to be the Epics, and the first one is going to be this 100 MRA boy over here. It's also very light. Sorry, not 100, but 97. Close enough. 97.9 MRA. It's a very lightweight car, coming at 900 kilograms. I'm putting it into Kaiser. I don't like Morgan, but I do understand that this car is really, really good. It's really, really light, really, really good MRA, a high top speed, and it has 100 handling as well when you max it out. Next up is the TVR Sibera Speed 8. Now, this car I've unpacked twice, and I gotta be honest, like, what the hell is the point of this? The thing is, right, the Sibera, I want to talk about every car in this range. So, the TVR, the Porsche 911, the Flachbau, or whatever it's called, the Flachbau, the Porsche 911 Carrera, like, these three cars, like, I love my Porsches, don't get me wrong. The only issue with these three cars, and I was thinking about this when I was making the video, when I was making the tier maker for this video, the three things that these cars suffer is that they perform closer to ultra rares. Like, they're more competitive with ultra rares in terms of their performance, but in terms of maxing them out, it is the same as a 79. Like, what I'm trying to say is that they perform closer to like a 64, 63 ultra rare, but in order to max them out, it's the same amount of resources you'll need if you want to upgrade a car that's also 79 or 78. So the main thing about these cars is that yes, they are able to beat ultra rares, but they are a lot more expensive to use. Like, it's, you got to think about the return, you know what I mean? And like, for this, like, you're not getting a lot of value. So unfortunately, I'm gonna put three of them in hot garbage. I do love my Porsches, don't get me wrong, I love them, but the main issue with these cars is that they're really only going to be seen as 1 stars, and at 1 stars they're not even going to beat the ultra rare. So they're not good. Next up is the Isima. Now the Isima, I'm gonna put it in freaking provider. The main thing about the Isima is that it's got 112 MRA and it's really, really good, but it's one of those cars where, like, it's like really good for the half mile, but if it was with another Epic that had a higher top speed and maybe a slightly worse MRA of, let's say, like 100 or like 98, that Epic is still going to win on the 1 mile because of the higher top speed. So yeah, the Isima, the main thing dragging it down is the fact that the top speed isn't high enough. That's why I love the Bristol so much, because the Bristol is cheap to use. It's got a high top speed, 200 miles per hour, and it's got 100 MRA. The Isima just falls flat on the top speed. On top of that, I can't use it in Italian events because the thing isn't even Italian. It's an Alpha, but it ain't even Italian, bro. Next up is this Audi Sport Quattro, and this is the car where I always ask people, like, oh, I don't own it, how is it? I like the car. It's got a really beautiful photo. From what I've heard from most people that actually own this car is that it's okay for the year that it's in. I think it's like 1986 or something like that. 1984. Like, it's all right. Medium ground clearance, 4-wheel drive, and it handles well. 0 to 60 could be a little better, but it is one of the better Audis, I would say. Maybe a little bit biased because I love that photo to death, but like I said, that's basically like feedback from other owners that I know. They say that it's okay. Next up is the Ford Escort. Now this car is daily driver. You already know it's just not as good as the 037, but it's still decent. Mercedes-Benz C12 or C112. It's got good MRA, 87, and it handles really, really well. The main thing weighing this car down is that 0 to 60. The 0 to 60 sucks, but the top speed is good. I'm gonna give it a very borderline. You might disagree with me, but I'll give it a very borderline daily driver. The thing about the Benz is that it kind of has like all of the great, like it hits all the right spots in everything but 0 to 60. That I can forgive. It's kind of like the opposite of, what am I trying to look for? It's kind of the opposite of the TVR Tuscan. The TVR Tuscan has a good 0 to 60, but everything else is kind of subpar. I guess you can say the top speed is pretty strong, so it's not the best analogy, I guess, or comparison, but in a way, I guess it kind of does make sense. Like, it still has a lower 0 to 60 than the Benz. It has worse handling, worse MRA, all that kind of stuff. And they're only 3 RQ apart, to be honest. Now, next up is the Porsche 911 RSR. Now, the Porsche 911 RSR is basically a worse Ginetta from lock to lock. It's got the same stats, 3.792, but the Ginetta has like 95 MRA. The Porsche 911 RSR only has 72. So because of that, I'm putting it in daily driver. Next up is the Porsche 924. Now, this car I love. I'm gonna give it Der Kaiser. Great MRA, great handling, low 0 to 60. It's amazing. Now, the next one over here is the Porsche 968 Turbo S, and I can't believe I'm doing this, but it's hot garbage. I'm sorry. I like the car. Don't get me wrong. I love it. I love the car. It has 100 handling. It has 100 MRA, and you'd think it would be really good, but the main thing about it is that it's actually like relatively heavy, and the 0 to 60 sucks. Let me show you why. Okay, maybe it's a bit mean of me to put it hot garbage, but as you can see, it wins absolutely nothing. Besides like 1 mile. That's it. That's where its 100 MRA kicks in. But outside of that, it wins nothing, bro. It loses to, you know, the TCR, the Emerge, which is the same RQ, and the Emerge is also medium ground, it's not medium, sorry, but performance tires. It also loses to the Acura HSC. It even loses to the Abarth 124 Spider Rally, like on a hairpin and indoor karting and karting circuit. Like, it's kind of unfortunate. Like the Porsche 968 Turbo, it looks like it's going to be really good, but it just ends up being a massive disappointment. I feel like it's a bit mean of me to put out hot garbage. I think it's going to be a pernicious ulcer, but like a low pernicious ulcer, and it hurts because I really like the car, but when you compare it to like its peers, it just doesn't live up to the hype. It's sad. Next up are going to be the Ultimas. The Ultimas, I don't have much to say. Their handling scores could be better. 87, 86 was good back in the day, not as good anymore. They're lightweight cars with decent 0 to 60s. Their MRAs are relatively strong at 85 and 86. Overall, I think that they are very like hybrid cars. Where's my mouse? Here it is. So I'm going to put them here in frequent provider. Then we move on to the legendary. So the first one is the Alfa Romeo 155 GTA Super Turismo. Now the main thing about this is that it has 100 MRA, 100 handling, and the biggest thing about it, it's a saloon. So because of that, I'm actually going to give it Der Kaiser. Although it is one of the weaker legendaries, as in like its RQ80, I would say that it's one of the stronger RQ80s. The only thing about the Alpha is that it doesn't have really good 0 to 60. Like 4.0 is a weak. To really get value out of that, you're probably going to need to max it out. But at the same time, you could probably get away with using it as a 1-star solely in saloon. So what I'm trying to say is that the fact that it's a saloon kind of saves it. If it wasn't a saloon, if it was a coupe, then I don't think it would be as good. The 4-wheel drive on that car, considering that it's slick tires, is also kind of irrelevant unless Hutch ever decides to make a all-rain event, and you can only use slick tires. Then yeah, your 4-wheel drives will be able to be a little better then. Next up is the Audi V8 Quattro, and again, 3.3, very, very low 0 to 60. I would say one of the better Audis for sure. Not as good as the Subaru Legacy slick tire, or whatever it's called, Legacy something. But it's still decent. It's still a saloon, right? Still a saloon. Still got a very, very low 0 to 60. It handles pretty well as well. 82 MRA. I mean, that's pretty good for an Audi, to be fair. So I'll commend it for that. Last but not least are the 3 big Porsches. Each Porsche that you see here over 100 MRA. 956 exactly 100. The Strassen version 106, and the other one, the 993 Strassin version, 102. All of them getting over 100 handling if you max them out. Very, very impressive cars across the board, and I would give every single legendary that you can get from this pack Der Kaiser. So definitely is a pretty decent pack. The only thing that's bad about the pack are literally just the Audis. If you get the Audis, I'm sorry. I mean, there's one decent Audi, right? The 4-wheel drive standard. And there's also like this Quattro DTM, which I'm putting in Der Kaiser. But honestly, I can see if you would put it in Daily Driver as well. I feel like it belongs in both areas. I would say a very low Der Kaiser or a very high Daily Driver. Like, I wouldn't argue wherever you put it. I think I'm gonna leave it in Daily Driver because I'm OCD and this just looks way nicer. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. Should you open the pack, maybe one or two, try your luck, just because it's a pretty decent pack with a bunch of new-ish cars. I opened one yesterday. I'm not disappointed. I got the Tuscan. It was a car that I didn't have before. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today. I hope you guys have a great day. Remember to stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to Jackson.